I'd like to welcome everyone. For those of you in Israel who I haven't yet had a chance to meet, my name is Rabbi Ze'ev Smason, and I'm the rabbi of Nusach Hari B'nai Zion congregation in St. Louis, Missouri, an Olivet suburb. And it's wonderful to be with all of you. I'd like to acknowledge at the outset co-sponsors of this gathering with Mr. Mark and Mrs. Harriet Levin, who will be speaking in just a few moments. The co-sponsors of our event today are three important organizations that are very pro-Israel, based in St. Louis and in the Midwest, and that would be the St. Louis Friends of Israel and Galit Lev Harir. We'd like to acknowledge Shaving Israel, a very important organization in St. Louis that supports lone soldiers in Israel, Chayalim Bodedim. The president is Dr. Laura Goldmeyer. I see Meira Ganello is here. Meira has been to Israel several times and very supportive of lone soldier activities and support. And also Stand With Us, an organization that I think everyone knows as well, Stand With Us, based in Chicago, and Adam Blue. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of Suriel Yorav. Suriel, if you could wave your hand to everyone. Suriel, everything good that's happened in the connection between Nusach Hari B'nai Zion and Musar, it's Suriel's fault. It's Suriel's fault. He's been the one who's come up with these great ideas and has been a wonderful partner. And we, our congregation, and Musar in this joint program have gotten a chance to know each other. And God willing, we'll all be able to be together in person soon.
I would, Rabbi, I would like also. I didn't finish. Okay, you can continue.
No. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I have the courage to speak. At the last two times, I didn't have the courage to speak. So I want to share with you all some things about this story. First, I want to thank Harriet and Mark for sharing with us this amazing story, and also for the sisters, and sure for you that you appeared here. I want to tell everybody why this story so touched my heart. One thing is that my friend Yuda Greenfeld also died in this war in Kfar Giladi. It was maybe 3 or 4 days after Michael. And the second thing that make me feel so connected to this story, the story of Michael, is that my wife made Aliyah from the United States, but not just she made Aliyah from the United States. It's unbelievable. It was on the same days of the war. During the Lebanon war, she made Aliyah to Israel. So for me, it was something that connect me to this story, and I learned, I understood what does it mean to be alone in Israel. She made Aliyah just by herself, so it's now I understand more what does it mean to be by yourself. So that was something that connect me with this story.
Thank you, Suriel. Just one other thought before we turn over the microphone, so to speak, to Mike and Harriet Levin. I'd like to ask my son Baruch to open up his screen. My son Baruch, one of our two sons who served as lone soldiers, and Baruch, if you could just like to say hello to the Levins and share a little bit of your connection with the Lone Soldier House and with Michael Levin.
Absolutely. Hi, guys. Michael's story was obviously, it's very, very strong to me because it was not only so relatable, it was very relevant once I got to Israel. There's not a lone soldier in Israel, I'm sure, as you guys know, that doesn't know of the Lone Soldier Center and know of Michael's story and has heard it many times. And once I drafted, I spoke of his story a lot as well in my interviews and my tryouts for the military. And I was supported a lot from the Lone Soldier Center, not only physically with, bed sheets and towels and stuff like that, care packages that they would give lone soldiers, but emotionally as well with the community. And I ended up living in a house with a bunch of other soldiers that was heavily supported by the Lone Soldier Center. So this organization is extremely relevant to me and extremely relevant to any other lone soldier that has made it to Israel. I want to say thank you, guys.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
in advance,
Thank you, Mark.
so in advance of Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut in the coming week, it's a great privilege and a pleasure to be together both with our friends from Musar Avicha Shul in Israel as we welcome Mark and Harriet Levin. So Levins, please share some thoughts and some stories. And again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi, and to everyone in Israel and the St. Louis, Missouri community and our friends in Florida that jumped on. It's good to see everybody, and we appreciate the time you've made to hear this story today. Michael grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Harriet and I are conservative Jews. We grew up here in the city of Philadelphia, and we belong to a conservative shul. And our kids went to Camp Ramah in the Poconos. And before we continue with Michael's story about a soldier, about making Aliyah, about the Second Lebanon War, we want to give you a little bit of background about Michael's journey as a young man.
Michael was just an ordinary kid who grew up no different than anybody else. The only difference is Michael knew at a very young age what he wanted to do with his life. Probably at about 9 or 10 years old, Michael started talking about going to Israel. I am the daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, and Michael was very close, especially to my dad, and he would tell him stories. And I think that was the first stepping stone of realizing how important it was to have our homeland. Then he went to Camp Ramah in the Poconos, and that was another stepping stone. In high school, he did high school in Israel, the Alexander Muss program, and his teacher was from Philadelphia who made Aliyah. And I think that really showed Michael, I can make this dream come true. And he worked very hard through high school to get to Israel. And Mark would take him around to look at colleges. He was accepted to Rutgers in New Jersey. And when the time came for Mark to send in the tuition payment, he said, no, I'm going to Israel. And as much as people said he's going to outgrow this, I think in my heart, I knew that he wouldn't. I mean, for his bar mitzvah, most kids picked out thank you cards with sports on it, or just the name. Michael had a Mogen David on it. For his 5th or 6th birthday, we had it at a baseball stadium, and Michael insisted on the cake being a Mogen David. He was the only one in his high school, which was public school, he didn't go to day school, who wore a kippah and tzitzit.
So from a very, very young age, we knew where Michael was headed. And people often ask us, how did he grow up to be such a Zionist? And believe it or not, I'd like to think that he really came out that way, that Hashem implanted this Jewish Zionist seed in him at birth, and all Harriet and I had to do as parents was just water it and watch it grow, because from a very, very young age, it was all about Israel. So when the time comes, Michael wants to go to Israel. He wants to join the IDF. He had aspirations of becoming a career officer. So he jumps on a plane, he goes to Israel and spends his first 2 nights sleeping on a park bench, because there were no national organizations in Israel to help people like Michael. I don't know how many people had a chance to view Michael's documentary, A Hero in Heaven, prior to this Zoom event, but there's one story that I just quickly want to relate. Michael was waiting weeks, even months, for his permission papers, I don't know what it's called, to be inducted into the IDF. Weeks and months, and he's pacing the floor in Israel, and the papers never come. So Michael goes down to I guess it's the induction center where you have to go, and he walks up to the front door, and there's 2 armed guards there with M16s, and they stop him and they say, "Papers." Michael says, "Well, I don't have any papers. I didn't get the papers. That's why I'm here." And they said, "Papers." And it goes back and forth a few times. And, finally they just told him to get away, that he can't gain entrance to the building. So Michael, being very clever and extremely resourceful, sits down and takes a look at the building, notices that on the windows and the doors everywhere on the first floor, there's bars. And he couldn't think about getting in. So he walks around the back of the building. There's a driveway back there. And he looks up at the second floor and he sees there are no bars on the second floor, and one window is open just a couple inches. So he looks behind him and he sees a trash dumpster. It's on wheels. So he walks over to the other side of the driveway, gets behind the dumpster, pushes it across the driveway up against the building, climbs into and on top of the dumpster, and shimmies himself up and just gets the tip of his fingers into that windowsill on the second floor, pushes the window up, pulls himself up, tumbles into the men's room on the second floor, picks himself up, brushes himself off, walks outside, walks downstairs, finds the appropriate room, walks in. The man says, "Next." Michael sits down. "Papers." Michael says, "I don't have any papers." He says, "Son, you can't get through the front door of this building without papers." And he said, "What makes you think I came through the front door?" And he told him the story of how he gained entrance to the building. And the man says, "I've been here for close to 20 years, and I believe you are the first person to physically break into this building to get into the IDF." He says, "Sit down, we'll fill out your papers." And that's how Michael got into the IDF. So we would speak to Michael every Friday morning here, Philadelphia time, maybe 7:30 in the morning, maybe 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Israel before Shabbos. Michael would call us. He would maybe be on guard duty in Hebron. And we'd have maybe a 10 or 15-minute discussion with him every Friday. And invariably, each discussion, he would mention a specific problem that he was having, that his Hebrew wasn't as good as it should be, and he needs some help interpreting some literature, some papers, and he doesn't know where to go. Or he gets home, he's got to leave, he comes home and he's got no food in the refrigerator, and he can't get to the laundry, he doesn't have a washer and dryer because everything's closed for Shabbos. Or it's Super Bowl Sunday coming up and he'd love to, get together with some other lone soldiers, but he doesn't know who or where to go. Or he needs some copying machine somewhere to, and every single week, it's just a little thing, nothing monumental, but these little things week after week after week, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times. After about a year and a half in uniform, and Michael was in the paratroopers by that time. After about a year and a half in uniform, Michael went to a good friend of his who worked for the Jewish Agency, and he said to him, "When I finish my service in a year," he says, "we are going to start a lone soldier center together." Michael figured that if he's having these types of problems and facing these types of challenges as a lone soldier, probably all lone soldiers are facing these types of problems and challenges. So Michael's sort of a dreamer, a visionary. So we'll discuss the creation of the center a little bit later, but we want to give you some more background. The stories about him getting his.
I thought Michael's downfall would be languages. He didn't excel in the English language. He took Spanish in high school and didn't do very well. There's no way he's going to learn Hebrew. He went not knowing anything, but he persevered. It was that important to him. We flew over for his induction into the Army and then again into the paratroopers. When Michael was trying out for the paratroopers, there were
250 people trying out, and they were only taking 1 out of 10.
Michael was 5'6", 118 pounds, soaking wet. And he was up against these men who were double the size of him. And he would call us and say, these guys are ripped. He says, I'm a peanut next to them. And the one thing Mark and I kept telling him was, but they don't have the determination that you do. And Mark kept telling him, they're going to underestimate what you can do because of your size. And Michael was chosen because of all of those things. He was so determined. And all his time in the Army, his friends would tell us it was because of him. Michael was always smiling and pushing and saying, you can do this, you can go further. Michael bloomed while he was in Israel. I've never seen him so happy in those couple of years, and how he blossomed.
So it comes the summer of 2006. Every lone soldier gets, I believe, a month off after their first year in service. And they're encouraged, if they can, to go home to visit their families. And Michael came home, and he's home for about 10 days, 2 weeks, and the Second Lebanon War breaks out. And Michael spent the next 48 hours with his phone in his hand, pacing up and down in our den in front of the TV. He had CNN on 24 hours a day, watching the war just explode on the TV. On the phone, trying to contact his commander, his friends. Finally, he said to us, Mom, Dad, he says, I can't take this. He says, I got to go back. He says, I have to go back and join my unit. The first 2 weeks of the war, there was no incursion into Lebanon. It was strictly an air campaign by the Israeli Air Force. So we found ourselves with Michael's 2 sisters driving out to JFK Airport and hugging and kissing our son goodbye in front of the LL Departure Lounge in JFK. And that would be the last time we would see Michael. He went back to Israel, and he goes back to find his unit, and his unit, just a day or 2 before he got back, was already briefed and was moving north in northern Israel for the upcoming incursion into Lebanon. So they told Michael, stay where you are or go to Hebron for guard duty, because we don't need you right now. The unit's already gone. And Michael's arguing with them back and forth and back and forth. I didn't come back here to guard some people in Hebron. I joined the IDF to defend Israel. That's what I came here to do, and that's what I'm going to do. And nobody would tell him where his unit was. So after making just dozens and dozens of calls, he finally got someone to tell him where his unit was. And to tell you the truth, we're not even sure how he got there. He walked, he hitched, he took a bus, he found his unit in northern Israel just before they went into Lebanon. And he walks into the room, and all of his, his friends, the other soldiers are thrilled to see him. And his commander says, Michael, what are you doing here? You don't have permission to join us. And the argument starts again. I didn't come back to Israel to guard people in Hebron. Not that they don't need guarding, but that's not why I came back. I'm going in with the troops. He says, no, you're not, Michael. Yes, I am. No, you're not. Went back and forth and back and forth. This is while everyone is gearing up and they're ready to go in. Finally, he gives Michael a specific order. Michael, you are to stay here and do this. This is your job. This is your order. You can't go in with us. And Michael says, no, I'm giving you an order. You have a choice. Either I'm coming in with the rest of the group, or I'm going back to America. But I'm not staying here. They argued some more. Finally, as Harry and I did through the years, we threw our hands up, we gave up, and the commander said, okay, fine.
Then the commander asked for a volunteer to lead the group in, and Michael volunteered. Michael was a sharpshooter, and he led the whole group into Aita al-Shab.
I tend to be a numbers guy, and I remember that in the Second Lebanon War, there were officially 121 IDF soldiers that fell in battle. Michael was the first paratrooper to die and the only American to die in the war. And then word came down to us that Michael had fallen. Want to tell yours?
The night before, at one of the synagogues here in Bucks County, there was a big rally, and hundreds of people turned out to show their support for what was going on in Israel. And someone we knew mentioned to the rabbi about Michael being there and fighting. And they gave us a standing ovation, which brought me to tears. And the next day I went to work, and the rabbi from our shul and the consul general walked in. And I thought, oh, they came to meet me because of Michael, because of last night. And they called me into my boss's office and shut the door and told me that Michael had fallen in battle. Our two daughters were close by. They were the next to know. And then we came home to tell Mark. And then Israel made arrangements for us to get to Israel right away.
It took us about 30 seconds for Harry and I to decide where Michael should be buried, because I had a conversation with Michael the year before, in the summer of 2005, when he was home. Michael was on some very, very dangerous missions in cities of Shechem and Jenin, and there was some fighting and casualties, and he was on some very, very dangerous missions. So I said to Michael, I said, you and I are going to have a conversation now that no father should ever have with a son. But, you're telling me about these missions that you were on. I said, God forbid you should fall in one of these missions. Your mother and I are going to have to make a decision about your final resting place. And he says, stop right there. He says, if you're asking me, God forbid, if I should fall in battle, he says, the decision is yours. But if you're asking me if that should happen, I would want to be buried in the military cemetery, Har Herzl in Jerusalem.
He also repeated it to me the last summer he was home. We were alone one day, and he told me his conversation with Mark. He says, that's where I want to be laid to rest. So when we found out about it, as much as we knew it would be hard to visit him, we knew that was the right thing to do. That was what Michael gave his life for, and that was his home.
So once again, for the people that did not see the video, A Hero in Heaven, I strongly suggest that you do. But I'll quickly relate this scene to you as Harriet and I get to Israel for Michael's funeral. We're with the army, and we pull up to the cemetery, Har Herzl, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people outside the cemetery. And my very, very first thought was, great, there must be 5, 10, who knows how many, 15 funerals going on in that cemetery today. It's going to be crazy. By the way, Michael was killed on the 7th of Av, and this is now Tisha B'Av. It's the 9th of Av for Michael's funeral. We go into the cemetery, and there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people inside the cemetery, all around Michael's kever. And we subsequently found out that Michael's funeral was the only one that day. Everyone who was there for Michael. And it's, I can't even describe to you.
We looked up, and there were people who had climbed into the trees so that they could get a better look.
International press, dozens and dozens and dozens of cameras. It was surreal. after about a year after Michael's funeral, the man that Michael approached while he was in uniform about starting a Lone Soldier Center left the organization he was working for, Jewish organization, along with a few other lone soldiers and our help, and started the Lone Soldier Center, an organization that was started by lone soldiers, run by lone soldiers. The programs that are thought of and initiated would be by lone soldiers. It would be their own organization. Prior to that, nothing like that existed in Israel. There were a number of people, individuals, that were running around doing the best they could to help lone soldiers, but there was no national organization. It just did not exist at all. So it's been quite a journey in the past, coming up to 15 years now. It started out as a Lone Soldier Center, and in the last year, there's another organization called the Michael Levin Base, another center, and there are other organizations in Israel too. I think there's like 10 other organizations in Israel now. We support a few of them, but Michael was the turning point, because prior to Michael's passing, I had some very prominent rabbis in this country come up to us and say they were embarrassed to tell us that prior to Michael's passing, they had never heard of the term Chayalim Bodim, lone soldier. It was something that was just, I'd like to say, under the radar. But there's been such a change in Israel now. I mean, now you go up and knock on somebody's door and say, I'm so-and-so from St. Louis. I'm a lone soldier and I don't have any place to eat tonight. Well, come on in, join us, and and nobody will turn you away. You go into a restaurant. I'm a lone soldier, I haven't eaten in 2 days. Sit down, eat. It's free. There's been such a change, such an understanding, appreciation for lone soldiers now in Israel that just did not exist. Michael was the change, definitely. So we have started an organization in this country called the Michael Levin Lone Soldier Foundation. It's a 501c3, and it is our duty to spread the word about lone soldiers in Israel, the needs that they have, and raise funds to support the lone soldier organizations in Israel that send us grants on a quarterly basis that we evaluate, and we decide where the money that we raised is going.
The government does not give us any help at all. We run solely on donations. So anyone listening, the website is michaellevinlonesoldier.org, and we can use your help. Any amount is appreciated. We help feed the soldiers. We help house them. We have counseling for them, which nobody has private counseling, because no soldier wants to go to the army, because then it becomes part of their permanent record. This past Pesach, because of COVID, they supplied thousands of meals for the entire week to lone soldiers, clothing, Shabbat meals every week during COVID, doctor's appointment, helping. We just were told about a couple that met and they helped put the wedding together. They were both lone soldiers. The list goes on and on.
So this was Michael's legacy as a proud Zionist, a proud Jew who wanted to go to Israel to serve the country, and hopefully, as I've said, to become a career officer in Israel. If you go to Michael's kever now, it's hard to believe, but the groundskeepers at Har Herzl tell us that Michael's grave is the most visited grave in the cemetery, with all the prime ministers buried there. It's hard to believe. his kever looks like a real polygon, somewhere between a junkyard and a sidewalk sale. There's just things piled on his grave that people leave that it's hard to believe. There's money on Michael's kever. There's more money on Michael's kever than there ever was in his pocket. And people leave just all kinds of things. It's unimaginable. But we're coming up on Yom HaZikaron. And the first Yom HaZikaron, we were in Israel. When we came back, we couldn't even, it was hard to explain to our friends what it was like. Because for Memorial Day here in America, what it's like is a day to spend with family. It's a day to have a barbecue. It's a day, there's sales at the mall. You can go out to the park and have a picnic. That's what Memorial Day is. It's considered the first day of summer here in America. In Israel, it's quite different. It's estimated that over 25% of the population of Israel is in cemeteries, visiting family of soldiers that have fallen. There's been, I'm not sure the exact number, it's somewhere over 22,500 IDF soldiers that have given their lives in defense of the nation, 72 years, and close to 4,000 victims of terror. So if you can imagine, Harriet and I get to the cemetery on Yom HaZikaron at about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And at 11 o'clock, there's a siren for 2 minutes and everything is still. The traffic stops on the street. There's 2 minutes of silence. The Prime Minister speaking. And we're sandwiched into an area, maybe 2.5 square feet next to Michael's kever. And we're sandwiched in there for, I'd say, close to 3.5 to 4 hours, close to 1 o'clock. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that are coming to Michael's kever. There are tens of thousands of people in the cemetery, but people want to come and show their appreciation for what Michael did. They want to meet us. They want to express to us their feelings, their connection to Michael. And the stories that we hear from the young kids, I mean, all the stories are different, but they always end with the same 3 words, which are, because of Michael. Mr. and Mrs. Levin, do you know I made Aliyah because of Michael? Do you know I joined the IDF because of Michael? Do you know I'm in the paratroopers because of Michael? Mr. and Mrs. Levin, I'm Yossi, this is Chaim, we're Israelis, and we had ambivalent feelings about joining the IDF. And they showed us Michael's documentary in school, and we had a class discussion about it. And we wanted to come here today and hope to meet the both of you to tell you that now we are going to proudly join the IDF because of Michael. And Harry and I figured this would fade through the years. It hasn't. Every single year that we were there. Of course, we couldn't be there last year because of the pandemic. Or this year, but we will be going this summer for Michael's yahrzeit, 15 years. But it's hard to believe how the impact that Michael's life, what he lived for, what he died for, has made such an impact on people.
The Army takes all the new inductees to Michael's grave and teaches them about Michael and said, this is what Zionism is for. This is the epitome of being a Zionist. The birthright groups go there. I get tons and tons of mail to answer. Michael always wanted to make a difference, and he didn't do it living, but he has certainly done it with his passing.
So we could probably go on for another hour or so with Michael's stories, but I think you got the idea. I encourage everyone to watch the video. I'm sure it's going to be up for a while, Rabbi. Is that correct?
I posted it in the chat, and let me
I saw.
post it again, and it's available for viewing until April 12th, which is
Great.
just tomorrow. So
Okay.
Rabbi, I'll extend it through Yom
Okay.
HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut. So
Okay,
through Wednesday.
okay, thank you very much for making it available.
Yep. It's 44 minutes long, and it is an award-winning documentary.
Yeah.
Yep. So I encourage everyone to watch it. And we encourage everyone, if you are touched by what you heard, if you're interested in helping lone soldiers, I encourage you to do what you can to help our organization.
Let me ask if there are any questions. If Michael, Mark and Harriet, is it okay now that if we take some questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask the Levins, feel free either to raise your hand and get their attention, or post your question in the chat box. So so anyone have any questions, please go ahead.
Nothing's off limits. We answer anything.
Rachel Pevnik, go ahead, unmute yourself, please, Rachel.
I'm very moved, of course. I don't really have a question, but I just want to know, I have a nephew in Philadelphia, and I'm sure if you call him that he will do everything he can to help you. His name is Stephen Katz, K-A-T-Z, and he owns Premier insurance company, but he is very charitable.
I know
And
Stephen.
do you really? That's my nephew.
Did Stephen, he used to own the kosher restaurant.
Yes.
His
Yes.
grandson goes to day school with one of our granddaughters.
Oh,
I
my
know
goodness.
Stephen.
Yeah, you know, he had his 12th grandson,
Yes,
grandchild last week.
I know. I wished him a mazel tov.
Oh, yeah, well, that's my brother, Oliver Shulman's son.
Wow. I will write him after we're done, Rachel, and tell him that we got to meet you.
Oh, well, it was nice meeting you, and I'm sorry for your loss, but it's you know,
Thank you.
what do they say? You know, that happens, you know, in life, and you should be very proud of him.
We are.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, my husband was in Second World War, and the children my grandsons are always proud of him. Also, you know, he was in. So be well, and
Thank you.
yeah.
Mark and Harriet, there's a question in the chat box. Do you have an official tzedakah box that we can have shuls here in Israel? The question was asked from Mark Lehrman.
No, people can make donations to either one of the centers. As far as I know, there's no tzedakah box. They would know better.
Yeah, the easiest way is to go online.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
I'd like to ask you a question, if I may, while perhaps some others may be asking questions. You mentioned that you've been blessed with 2 daughters. To what degree is Michael's service and his lessons and the life that he led, to what degree has that impacted their commitment to Israel in general and Judaism in general? Are they changed as a result of their brothers, who is such a remarkable man?
I just whispered to Harry, I'm going to let you handle this one.
Michael, one of the girls is a twin to Michael, though he was closer to his older sister. His passing really affected her. Michael was, besides being her younger brother, was like a best friend to her. They did a lot of things together. Has impacted them. Certainly his older sister. His twin, it's really hard to say. I think she's more or less swept it under the rug and hasn't really dealt with it. She talks about Michael when she wants to talk about him. It's on her terms.
It's night and day between the 2 girls.
Yeah, they're really very, very different. His twin really didn't want him to go, as much as they were oil and water most of the time.
It's a tough question to
It
ask,
really is.
to answer rather.
Thank you for your response. Does anyone else have any questions or comments that they'd like to share with the Levins?
I saw something came up about Yoni Netanyahu. Yeah, he was on one of Michael's heroes. And in fact, I was in Michael's room before, and in his closet, he's got 2 books written by Yoni Netanyahu. And every once in a while, this is obviously before he made Aliyah, I'd come into his room at 11 o'clock at night. His light would be on, Michael would be sound asleep, and one or both of those books would be open on his chest that he was reading. So yeah, he was certainly a big influence. In fact, when you're standing at Michael's kevar, if you just walk over to the low wall that separates the areas, you can look down 2 sections. I can see Yoni's grave from Michael's grave.
I see there's a question from a gentleman who's titled iPad over there.
Yeah, it says iPad. My name is Robert Dunn, and I happen to be friends with my wife, and I happen to be friends with Mark and
Harriet, thanks, Donnie. What kind of friend?
I lost my mind, Harry. This Florida sun is getting to me. I actually am involved with Israel pretty extensively, and through business and through travel. And we actually were at the Lone Soldier facility in Jerusalem 2 years ago. And I can tell you that it is an amazing place, that every one of those soldiers that we met with is getting a great deal of benefit from that facility. So, and as a matter of fact, they were not shy either about asking us for donations, and we all made a donation at that point. And then also, you have the cards, don't you, Harriet? That you can make a donation for bar mitzvahs and special life events and so forth.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and you can send those out, I assume.
Absolutely. I'd be
Okay,
happy
yes.
to.
Yes. But
Thank
yeah,
you, Lillian.
Thank you.
Thanks
Now
for
when
your
you-
support.
Thank you for your support. And now when you go back, there's 2 facilities in Jerusalem to see.
okay, we'll be there. You know that.
God willing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Meira, go ahead, please. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi. I'm very emotional because I think it's a great honor to meet you.
Thank you.
I watched the movie, the documentary, and was very, very touching.
Mhm.
And I think you're doing what a wonderful way to remember your son. As Rabbi mentioned, there's an organization here, Shaving Israel, which I volunteer at. We've got some of the board members here too, and we, through Baruch, the rabbi's son, we got connected with one of the lone soldier homes, and I understand now they're a part of your organization.
They were started by our organization.
Yeah, they're under your umbrella.
Mhm.
And I learned yesterday that actually the guy Guy Moses, who runs the homes, 2 homes, is actually on the board of your organization. And we support your homes in things that they need, that we learn that they need, not with money, but with items that we purchase specifically for the soldiers in your homes. And now that I see you, it just puts everything together.
Thank you.
And it's very, very, it's just a wonderful way to remember him. And what you do just helps so much, such a great help for the lone soldiers in Israel that are serving our country. And you're just the help, everything that you're helping them is just so wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do.
Yeshal koach to you, you know.
Tודה רבה.
You know, just wonderful.
I'd like to acknowledge, if I may, the presence of Rachel Miller. Rachel, if you could wave to everyone and say hello. Rachel is the founder of
Yes.
Shaving Israel, this organization that Meir was speaking about, Shaving Israel in St. Louis, that has provided so much help and support to soldiers in Israel. So Rachel, it's very nice to see you. As I mentioned at the outset of our program, co-sponsors of the program from at least the St. Louis side are Shaving Israel, St. Louis Friends of Israel, and Stand With Us. Let's just take another few moments and see, does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Rachel, if you could unmute yourself and go ahead, please. Rachel, you're on mute. Rachel, you're on mute, but unmute yourself, please, and go ahead.
Rachel, just press the space bar.
Perhaps while Rachel's trying to unmute herself, I see Dov Shmuel Friedman has a comment or a question. So Dov Shmuel, if you'd go ahead, please.
Please help me out here. I keep hearing that the organization is called Shaving Israel, like getting rid of one's whiskers. That can't be right, can it?
It is.
It's Shaving Israel?
Yes. I was in Israel many years ago, and I was on a mission with the Federation, and I had a friend of mine who was a convert, and she was more Jewish than I'll ever be, and she did a lot of sorel. Are you familiar with sorel?
Mhm.
Is that one of those volunteer for the Army organizations?
I beg your pardon?
That is one of the volunteer for the Army organizations?
Is correct. And she was a volunteer, and she came back and she said they needed toilet paper. They had no toilet paper. And that's where the organization started. We had a focus group and a rabbi from Illinois, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, said Shaving Israel. And that's how the name came up. Yes, it does mean instead of saving, it is shaving. And as Meir Ganel, who is a very incredible volunteer of our organization, but I also want to thank Rabbi Smason, who has been so supportive of our organization, has given us the ability to have events at the synagogue. And I want to thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rachel. And
Rabbi, if I may jump in, one thing I
Please.
wanted to mention that I forgot, that I'd like to mention now. People frequently ask about the numbers. How many lone soldiers are there in the IDF? And the answer is that there are close to 7,000. There's about 1,000 from the United States, and there's probably 1,000 from Western Europe, and the other 1,000 from Eastern Europe and South America. But the balance, the other 3,000 are Israelis. And the first time I heard this, I really didn't understand. How can there be Israeli lone soldiers? Well, to explain, there are Israelis who are orphans. There are Israelis that are runaways. They were living on the street. There are Israelis that come from abusive homes. They're not living parents. But the vast majority, let me back up. There are Israelis whose parents are living and working outside of Israel, and the kids decided to stay in Israel, and they have no one else. But the vast majority of those 3,000 are kids that come from very, very, very religious communities, Haredi communities. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, a lot of those soldiers, I mean, some really want to serve Israel, but a lot of them have decided that they don't want to live that kind of lifestyle anymore and want to join the IDF because they see participation in the IDF as their ticket into Israeli society at large. And when they make that decision and tell their parents and their families, many of them are asked to leave and not to come back.
Most.
They are ostracized by their families, by their communities, by their rabbis. It's a terrible thing. And a lot of them are showing up at the centers, and they're considered lone soldiers in Israel.
We have special people to work with them because their education is studying, not so much math or reading, people to bring them up to par, to teach them Israeli Hebrew, not davening Hebrew. When I go over and I meet them, they all speak Yiddish, and that was my first language. So I get to speak Yiddish to them. I also want to mention something that Mr. Dunn brought up. We have their like coupon books. And if you write on the website to me, it's a way of sending cards out for any occasion, a birth, a mazel tov, God forbid somebody passes, a new home, a baby, whatever. They're $10 a card, and I send them out for you. I mail them for you. I'll be happy to send you a book, or if you just want to do the donation online, you can do that as well.
We'll get back to the questions if there are any more, Rabbi.
Okay. Any other Meira, you had something you want to share? Meira, go ahead, please.
I wanted to ask, hopefully I'll be going in May to visit. I'll probably be in the homes visiting the soldiers, but also I would like to try to go to, if you have the lot number for me, where I can go visit.
Dalid 6.
Okay. Okay, I will
Just
try
ask
to
the
get them.
groundskeepers. They'll point you in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, our gathering today wouldn't be complete with, again, my thanking Suriel and all of our friends, all of our mishpachat, Musar, Avicha, Shul, and Male Adumim. And please send our warm regards. Please, Suriel, please send my warm regards to your esteemed Rav Friedman. And thank you so much, everyone, for being together with us. This has certainly been quite memorable. Again, we posted in the chat box a link to the film, to the documentary, A Hero in Heaven. And if anyone wasn't able to see it or access it, please send me an email. My friends here in St. Louis know how to get in touch with me. And thank you, Mark and Harriet, for extending the viewability of it through Yom HaZikaron. I want to wish everyone a meaningful Yom HaZikaron and a Chag Sameach, Yom HaTzmut coming up this coming week. And may we get together again only b'smachot, only on happy occasions, and only share good news together. And I feel Mark and Harriet, I feel like we here in St. Louis have made new friends. We've made new friends with you. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Rabbi.
much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.